we're heading into what will be really rough times, and that's why Americans have to think clearly and be creative and don't accept the consensus or the official narrative.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us. I'm very glad to have back on the line the national spokesperson for LaRouchePAC and a good friend to SGT Report, Harley Schlanger. And boy, do we have some dramatic current events to break down, both domestically and geopolitically. Harley, welcome back.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, and as you know, global events are occurring at a dizzying pace. Obama's doubling down on free trade. I want to talk about the Saudi terror alliance and the rial crashing, turning into a full-blown liquidity crisis, though, to start. I got to tell you, Harley, what's going on right now in Saudi Arabia, we need to focus on it because these guys are now paying government contractors with IOUs, and meanwhile, the Senate has passed a bill allowing 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia for its involvement in 9/11. I think they're ready to throw Saudi Arabia under the bus, and our friend V from Rogue Money just did an update in which he mentioned some very important things as it relates to Saudi Arabia. But before I play that soundbite, I want to throw it to you. Your thoughts on what's going on with Saudi Arabia?
Well, the newest development, of course, was the JASTA bill passing in the Senate unanimously, and then Obama coming out saying he's going to veto it, which is, in my thinking, excellent because it makes the point that Obama, from the beginning of his administration, has been protecting Bush and the alliance, which is not just about 9/11. I mean, 9/11 were 3,000 Americans murdered, and the Bush administration blocked any serious investigation, and the FBI, of course, and Obama has continued that. But more importantly, it's that the Saudis have continued to be at the center of funding international terrorism, and this has been protected. And as you know, at LaRouchePAC, we've been on this case from the beginning, working with former Senator Bob Graham, who was one of the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission. So the important thing is that this now boxes Obama in terms of what he can do in the United States. You add to that what Putin has done to box him in internationally, and we actually have an opportunity to tie his hands, if not to get him out of office, at least to tie his hands. Now, that's why I think this is so important, because the Saudis are facing an internal problem in terms of the financing. They're caught up in a completely foolish genocidal war in Yemen, and the Obama policy has been to support them, including just his recent visit as this whole story was breaking. And I think it's also important that Trump brought up the 28 pages in the South Carolina debate, which gave the story more legs. Then it was picked up again on 60 Minutes, the 28 pages that have been classified from the 9/11 report. So all in all, Sean, this is one of the better developments, and it just goes to show that people who are pessimists and say the truth will never come out haven't been involved in fighting for the truth long enough. Sometimes it takes a lifetime to get the truth out, but you can't cover things up forever.
Well, that's right, and you and I have been covering for a very long time the fact that Saudi Arabia is the source of the funding and the source of much of the global terror. You'll recall, of course, the Russian-Saudi showdown at Sochi, in which Prince Bandar threatened Putin with terror from Chechen terrorists that were under the control of Saudi Arabia. It's just another example of the never-ending litany of terror coming from Saudi Arabia. Now, of course, you know as well as I do that the 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission report will finger Saudi Arabia for helping fund the terror attacks of 9/11, but it will not mention Israel or the Mossad.
And at that point, we were taken for another round of questioning, this time related to our allegedly being members of Mossad. The fact of the matter is, we are coming from a country that experiences terror daily. Our purpose was to document the event.
And I firmly believe that Israel and Mossad played a direct role in what happened on 9/11 as well, which leads me to believe that all of this is being orchestrated to throw Saudi Arabia under the bus, whilst never mentioning Israel.
Well, there's an element to this with when you throw someone under the bus, you always face the possibility that they'll come out and tell the truth. Now, I don't know if that'll happen, but as you know, the other part of this that's crucial is that we're talking about continuing policy. The Saudis and Israelis are totally joined at the hip in their policy of supporting terrorism and an anti-Iran policy. Now, it's also the case that you've had, besides the Saudi attempts to blackmail Putin before the Sochi Olympics, they threatened to blackmail the United States. They said if you release the 28 pages, or if you pass JASTA, the bill that allows the 9/11 family members to sue Saudis, that they'll cash in the treasuries they're holding. And their foreign minister said they're holding $750 billion worth. I saw a report that it's more like 115 billion. But the important point is, where do they get off threatening to blackmail the United States? And why do we submit to that? And I would argue that bigger than Israel and Saudi Arabia in this is the City of London and Wall Street, because the Saudi money laundering operation, the Israeli component of that, are all part of the City of London global financial policy, which includes the free trade agreements. It includes destruction of sovereignty. So the 9/11 28 pages doesn't have a conclusive report. What it does have is investigative leads that could be followed.
That's right.
And that's what's important.
That's right. And it will destroy the official myth and fable of what happened on 9/11 forever. Because you and I both have sheeple people, friends and family and colleagues that believe hook, line, and sinker the official story of 9/11. And we have been screaming from the rooftops since pretty much day one that they need to investigate 9/11. Look at Building 7. Look at so many of the anomalies of 9/11. It is
Sean, LaRouche did an interview. He was doing an interview when the planes went into the World Trade Center. And he said, don't try to pin this on Osama bin Laden in a bat cave in Afghanistan.
Right.
You have to look for the higher hidden hands involved in this. And this is what a lot of people have been fighting for a long time. But finally, and we've been at the forefront of this, Senator Graham, Congressman Walter Jones from North Carolina has been quite important. And now, most important, the family members of the victims of 9/11 put out a statement yesterday attacking Obama, finally naming Obama as the obstacle to getting this released and allowing true justice to take place. So I think this is a unique moment. We could be seeing the end of the Obama era. And I don't mean waiting until January 2017. Minimally, he'll be turned into the lamest of lame ducks, possibly brought up for criminal prosecution for this.
Yeah, and he should be. And one thing I'll say about this criminal Senate and Congress is that, at least in this case, to their credit, they have by proxy blown the official story out of the water by essentially admitting that Saudi Arabia played a role in what happened on 9/11. And of course, that's not in the 9/11 Commission report. That's not part of the official story. And by passing this bill allowing 9/11 victims to sue Saudi Arabia, they have by proxy said the official story is a lie. And
I hope Obama goes ahead with his threat to veto it, because even such lackeys as Chuck Schumer, who's one of the co-sponsors of the bill, Schumer said he's going to fight to make sure this veto is overturned. And that would be something new as well for this Congress.
Absolutely. And it's a beacon of hope, and it's a ray of hope. And boy, do I have a ray of hope to play you later in this interview again from V, the guerrilla economist, our mutual friend. So let me get back to Saudi Arabia as it pertains to the petrodollar and the collapse of the House of Saud. This is from V's latest update called Sandstorms and Euro Myths. And I think it's important. Listen to this.
Saudi Arabia is on the verge of collapse. And I'm telling you right now, when the Saudis go bye-bye, they will dump whatever U.S. treasuries they have. It will implode the dollar market. It would be one hell of a mess for the ESF, the Emergency Stabilization Fund, and their dark accounting books, so to speak, their dark dollar consumption. It's going to be one hell of a mess for them to clean up and sop up between them and the Federal Reserve.
Now, I wanted to play that for you, Harley, just to get your perspective, but I think as part of the bigger picture, as we document the collapse, what's going on with Saudi Arabia right now as it pertains to the petrodollar, the rial, the fall of the House of Saud, it cannot be overstated the importance of this geopolitical event that's playing out in real time.
Well, the Saudis have been a mainstay of the financial system going back to the oil hoax of 1972-73. But this is also part and parcel of the whole collapse of the Western financial system.
Right.
There was a report issued by the Institute of International Finance, which is sort of like a house organ for the bankers cartel. They put out a report a couple of days ago in which they said There's now $10 trillion of debt instruments globally that are trading at real negative interest rates. Now, what does this tell you? Why would people be buying bond offerings at negative interest rates? And here's an interesting side effect to that. Ireland and Belgium placed 100-year bonds in the last 2 weeks, and Spain just issued a 50-year bond. Now, why would someone buy a 100-year bond at 2.5% interest? This is the desperation of the system. They cannot finance or refinance their debt. They're just stringing it out, trying to get whatever funds they can so they can keep buying and selling worthless assets. But this is an admission of a failure of the system. And this is why there's panic on Wall Street in the City of London. And you add to that the usual ability to throw in some Saudi money to keep the system going. You take that away, and they're almost out of options.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm going to now play for you this glimmer of hope from V, because I think he stands in alliance with you as it pertains to not all news is bad news. There is a chance to beat these guys, especially when they're in a corner, as they appear to be right now. Listen to this.
You could add the EU implosion to the long list of elite failures of the 21st century. Because it seems like these guys had their game together in the 20th century, and then the 21st century came around and they just choked. They choked. Why? Well, because the forces of good always kicks the living crap out of the forces of evil. It just happens to be that way. They choked because of the very things that their hubris has created, like the internet, has backfired. And now we are not only biting the hand that feeds us, we're going to tear their heads off.
All right, I had to play that because I found it really inspirational when I listened to it in real time the other night, and I posted it at SGT Report and at thephaser.com. V is right, Harley. The forces of good will defeat evil. Obama has outed himself as a dictator-in-chief, as a servant of Wall Street in the City of London, and the whole world can see it. And I think now Americans are beginning to see it as well.
You know, there's an old Yiddish proverb, the truth never dies, but it lives a miserable life. I think what we're seeing is a moment where the handfuls of us who have been fighting to bring the truth out into the public eye are going to have a major effect on upcoming developments. What V is saying is absolutely right. These guys are bungling fools. It's not that they've ever been good, but this global elite has had their way for so long. Going back to 1971 when Nixon took the dollar off gold and set up the floating exchange rates. Once the opposition crumbled in the Democratic Party to that, you know, the Democrats used to oppose the free trade agreements. And then beginning around 1986 with the establishment of the Democratic Leadership Conference, they went hook, line, and sinker in with the Wall Street crowd and the Republican Party. And since that time, there's been a general consensus. The official narrative is free trade is the way of the future, deregulation, globalism, and they're seeing a backlash in many cases from people who don't really understand what the real principal issues are, but who know that the policies have failed. And so now it's our job not just to cheerlead the failure, but to put forward a positive agenda that can not only defeat this evil empire, and I'm talking really about the City of London, their control over Europe, and their control through Wall Street of the U.S. presidency for a number of presidential terms, but most particularly the Obama and Bush terms. This is now on the verge of ending. And we want to make sure that it ends not with an explosion that blows everything up, but with an orderly reorganization that gets rid of the too big to fail banks, gets rid of the speculative system, and reemphasizes the idea of economic nationalism and investment in physical economy, which is the only way you create an alternative system. And that's already underway. There are an extraordinary number of developments and meetings since the last time we talked, with the ASEAN now today meeting with Putin and Sochi. You have Abe, the Japanese prime minister, who's not much of a good guy, but he was told by Obama, don't meet with Putin until after the G7. Well, he didn't listen to him. He met with Putin last week, and now they're signing major agreements for Siberia. The Chinese are all over the place. And then you see the counter reaction, the attempt to pull a coup in Brazil to bring down the Brazilian government and replace it with a government that Goldman Sachs just gave its official seal of approval to, a debt collection regime in Brazil. So we're seeing a war that's being fought, and most of the time it's been in the shadows. But thanks to you, thanks to what the courage of Lyndon LaRouche and other people who are in a dialogue with us, we're now beginning to bring it out of the shadows into the eye of the public. And this is a fight we can win.
Yeah, I firmly believe that. I'm actually getting goosebumps as we're talking here, Harley, because I think humanity can rise, humanity is rising, and humanity is getting really pissed off at these guys as it pertains to secretive trade agreements like the TPP. It's just an absolute fraud against the people. It's a corporate takeover, and Obama willingly serves these corporate masters.
Back in April 2009, I was present at a webcast that Lyndon LaRouche did, and at that time he identified Obama as a pathological narcissist. And we had been trying to see if he was serious about changing the terms of the bailout, which he said he was, but he obviously didn't. And it became clear at that point that he represented something that was very different from what he told the American people during the election.
And may I just say, he's a pathological liar. He said many things that he promised that he is completely reneged on.
Well, and what I would say is that what you have to look at with Obama, again, is the hidden hands. Now, Obama is a perfect puppet because he is, in a sense, a satanic figure. A pathological narcissist has no empathy for the people who are the victims of his policies. Mm-hmm. And you see that with Obama, the drone policy, his continued insistence on regime change in Syria, despite the fact that the military and other intelligent people are saying, look, if you get rid of Assad, you're going to end up with a terrorist state in Damascus that will overwhelm Jordan and Lebanon. He doesn't care. Now, you also have the reaction against the Russia policy of Obama. The French National Assembly just voted to lift the sanctions against Russia. There are voices from Germany, the president of the state of Saxony, which is a very important state from the former East Germany, the Treasury Secretary from North Rhine-Westphalia, which is the most industrial area of Western Germany. They said, look, this is madness. We ought to lift the sanctions. Even the CSU, the Conservative Christian Social Union, which is a partner party with Merkel, is saying lift the sanctions. So what does Obama do? He not only says we have to extend the sanctions against Russia, but because of Russian aggression, we have to build NATO forces, including permanent stationing of Americans in Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia, and Poland, as though 1,000 Americans on a permanent rotation would actually stop the Russians if the Russians really did intend to invade. So what you see is a psychopathic mentality who then goes and publicly says, this is the greatest economic recovery ever from a financial crisis. Now, it's such a blatant lie. I'll give you one other example of this, Sean, because I've been fighting to get people to realize that it's not just that Obama's evil, but he's weak and vulnerable and can be defeated. When the Russian-backed Syrian army took back Palmyra, which is an important historical city, which includes very important archaeological ruins and so on, when the ISIS was beheading Christians in the 2,000-year-old amphitheater, the Russian-backed Syrian army came in and drove ISIS out. And Obama's spokesman, Josh Earnest, could not even say that was a good thing. So the fraud of the war on terror has been exposed by what Putin has done and by what Obama is doing. And you and I know that the initial war on terror had nothing to do with fighting jihadists because we were supporting these jihadists. It always had to do with domestic policies, the NSA, secret state, and so on. All of this, the cover has been ripped off, and if we go courageously into this fight and tell the truth and mobilize people, we can win.
Yeah, and you're right, Harley. Geopolitically speaking, 9/11 and the false flag terror we've seen has been used, of course, to begin these unconstitutional wars of aggression, all of which serves, I think, Zbigniew Brzezinski's grand chessboard as we go and destroy nations like Libya, like Iraq, like Afghanistan, like Syria now.
Yeah.
It's just an absolute cesspool. But before we
Actually,
let...
just and one other point on that. Brzezinski represents what you might call the Democratic side through Madeleine Albright, who was his protege, and Albright's protege, Susan
And
Rice.
we have Kissinger on the other side, right?
Well, Kissinger and the neocons, the Wolfowitzes, the PNAC, the Project for a New American Century, and they all start from a certain assumption, which is that the globalist corporate state must be protected at all costs against any nationalism or any countries that would band together to fight it. And until recently, it's been unchallenged. But the emergence of the BRICS, Putin's initiatives, Xi Jinping's initiatives, and now this is beginning to be reflected in the United States in the at least the growing opposition to Obama's policies. This does represent a complete change of the agenda.
All right, I want to ask you one other thing about Obama here. You described him as a demonic figure, and I think that really could not be more true at this point. And he's doing really insane things along with his Department of Justice. Case in point, this transgender order. He wants public schools, Harley, to open up the bathrooms to people who may decide on any particular day that today they feel like a female if they're a boy. He's demanding that these people be able to use the locker rooms and showers of their choice as well. It's absolute lunacy, and it's causing outrage across this nation as people wake up to this blatant tyranny. And it's not even a decision that a president should make. It should be something that the Congress and Senate debates and passes into law if it's that important to them. But this guy is off the reservation, Harley, and people can see it. He's insane.
One thing I would say about that is that part of the so-called social policies of the Obama administration are designed to get an outrage in the population, but to take the focus off the bigger picture. And look, I have young children. You know, this transgender ruling from Obama concerns me greatly. But I think the solution to it is to impeach the guy for his crimes. And I'll just give you a sense of this in a statement that came from LaRouche yesterday. He said that the 9/11 thing that opens up the question of the truth about the continuous series of disastrous wars U.S. forces have had to fight, kill, and die in since 9/11/2001, while its people have gone through economic and psychological hell. He went on to say Obama has been at war longer than any president in America's history, all of it without congressional consent, unconstitutional, and leading to the spread of chaos and terrorism across the Mideast and North Africa into Europe and the United States. Now, that's the point that people have to take up, because that's where he's impeachable on this question of the unlawful assertion of his authority to send people to war. So I think, as much as I oppose virtually everything that he's done, I think we have to keep focused on the central issue, which is the usurpation of the power of Congress by the president, which is an impeachable offense.
Yeah, you're right. And we want to keep our eye on the ball. But I will tell you this, Harley, these corporatists, these globalist corporations like Target, who take the bait from a guy like Obama and then tell their customers, we're going to open up these bathrooms to anybody who wants to use them, despite maybe what their birth certificate says. People are outraged. People are boycotting Target, and the stock has plummeted. So I like the fact that people have the power to cripple these corporations when they want to run roughshod over what the people want. So if they want to move against us, we don't shop there. They want to support Obama? We don't shop there. We sell their stock. We don't buy their stock. I'll tell you what, it's sort of inspirational to me to see some of these things happening as people are being vocal in this country. And before I let you go, Harley, I have to ask you about what's going on in South America. You touched on it briefly. From Brazil to Argentina to Venezuela's total societal collapse due to hyperinflation, South America is in a lot of trouble. What do you make of what's going on, and what would you say about what's going on in Venezuela specifically as people are now turning to cats, dogs, and pigeons to try to feed their families?
Well, there's been a war against any nation that turns on the Anglo-American empire. And we see that explicitly in Brazil, where there's no real actual crime that they can charge President Dilma Rousseff with, except that she was president when there was corruption. I got news for you. There's been corruption in Brazil because the whole system has been based on this British speculative system. Just as there's corruption in the United States. What about the Panama Papers? Have we learned nothing? The offshore banking, the crimes of HSBC and Credit Suisse and JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs. The corruption starts at the top of the globalists, but what they do is they selectively target countries as they move against them. Remember, the NSA was tapping into Dilma Rousseff's cell phone the same way they were with Merkel. So what's being done in South America is to prevent what was a promising development of a break with the American-British consensus, what they call in South America the Washington Consensus, and a move toward alliance with the BRICS. And Venezuela was a part of that, Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador, Bolivia. You have these countries that began to see some hope that if you put modern infrastructure in, that they could emerge from the backwardness that was imposed in a post-colonial era. Now in Venezuela, obviously it's the oil price war that was run by, the Saudis are doing this with the British, driving the price down to basically bankrupt a number of companies. I find something interesting, though, about this. Again, you talk about the unintended consequences. I think I don't remember which one, but one of the rating agencies just lowered the credit rating of ExxonMobil. And in their report, they identified problems of lower prices and other things, but they had a very striking comment. ExxonMobil, since 2010, I believe, has spent $52 billion buying their own stocks to keep their stock value up, instead of paying down debt, instead of investing in innovation and research and development. So in other words, they've borrowed money at 0% interest, which has led to a huge increase in their debt. And for what purpose? Buying their stock. Now, if that isn't another sign of the death of the system, I don't know what it's going to take for us to see that. So we see resistance coming in Brazil. This is not a done deal. The guy who just took over as the vice president actually has more real personal involvement in corruption. And will the Brazilian people give him a pass? It's going to be very chaotic because you have the Olympics coming up, you have the Zika virus, you have hyperinflation, a collapse of the government there. We're heading into what will be really rough times. And that's why Americans have to think clearly and be creative and don't accept the consensus or the official narrative. And I think we've seen with both the swelling of support for Sanders and Trump, not just a rejection of Hillary and the team of idiots on the Republican side, but we're seeing Americans say, we don't want this damn establishment anymore. So we've got to create a new option. And that's what we've been trying to do with the Glass-Steagall program, the investment of funds into infrastructure through a national banking policy. I think we can win this fight, Sean. And for the naysayers out there who say, well, they're too powerful, the people who are seemingly too powerful spend all their time in meetings trying to figure out how to keep us dumb and passive. And if we realize that, maybe we'll be less passive.
Yeah, and that's why I love speaking with you, Harley, because you're a cup half full guy, and so many out there are cup half empty people. And that's what I also love about LaRouchePAC.com. You guys are posting articles on a daily basis that are hopeful in nature because not only are they identifying the enemies of freedom and liberty, they're proposing solutions. So, Harley, direct us to the website for LaRouchePAC, will you?
Yeah, the place to go is LaRouchePAC.com. And if you want to be in touch with me, we've just added a feature, which is under the Get Active section. You can type in action.larouchepac.com/Harley, Harley. So if you can remember the first part, action.larouchepac.com/Harley, you can put in a name and email address. If you want, you can put in a phone number and we can be in touch. I think this is going to be a moment of truth for the American people. And you know that I've been talking for years, LaRouche has been talking for years about impeaching Obama, and everyone says it's impossible, it can't be done. Whether or not it's possible, all it would take is one congressman to put forward a bill of impeachment, and we would be able to then detail the crimes of this man. And beyond that, who's he acting for? Is this really about his legacy, or is it about someone else's power? And I think this is the most important thing, that we can get the truth out and win this fight.
All right. Now, of course, I was ready to wrap it up, but do you want to give us one last word here on Hillary Clinton? Because, my God, Harley, if she ends up in that White House, I need to get out of this country. I can't live through 4 years of a Clinton mafia member sitting in the White House.
Well, Hillary represents the same interests that Bush and Obama have represented.
Right.
And it's very clear, it's unmistakable. And she can talk about being a woman all she wants. I mean, what difference does it make? If you're a whore for Wall Street or a puppet for Wall Street, what difference does your gender make? I think it's going to, the election is going to be very interesting because it's so unpredictable. And it's still possible. I mean, why do you think Bernie's hanging on? It's still possible that something's going to happen that will knock Hillary out. And I think that's an important hope, because she has been degenerated so much since she ended up in the Secretary of State's position. Not that she was so great before that, but she has become a spokesman for all the worst policies of the last 16 years. And we can't afford to have her in the White House.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, I want to direct you again to LaRouchePAC.com. A great article at the top today. We've already covered it, but I'm going to read part of this anyway. America's problem is the current president. Following the Senate's unanimous passage of JASTA, the Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism Act, allowing victims of the 9/11 terror attacks to sue the monarchy of Saudi Arabia, the survivors and victims' families issued a statement of gratitude and determination, which chose as its target Barack Obama. And they say, "We are tired of witnessing President Obama block our path to justice," end quote. He is a criminal. He is a servant of the New World Order, City of London banksters, and we will defeat him with your help, Harley, and with the help of the folks at LaRouchePAC. Guys, support Harley. Visit LaRouchePAC.com, and Harley Schlanger's been our guest. Thank you so much, Harley.
Thank you, Sean. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. And guys, thanks for your support at sgtreport.com, thelibertymill.com, and thephaser.com. Real news 24/7. God bless.